Yesterday, Hurricane Melissa was about to destroy our house. It was one of the strongest storms Jamaica had ever seen, and we didn't have the money to evacuate. All we could do was stay inside, hold each other tight, and pray the roof wouldn't give way. The wind roared like a living creature, shaking the walls and swallowing our voices. We had no chance of surviving, none. But just when everything seemed lost, my daughter noticed a strange light shining through the window. What happened after that is hard to explain, and most people won't believe me. But I know what I saw, and I know it was real. Before I tell you what happened next, like this video so more people can hear this story of faith, and write in the comments where you're watching from and how old you are. I want to see how many of us still believe that miracles can happen. My name's Dwayne Campbell. I'm 34, and I've spent most of my life in a small village by the Jamaican seaside, tightening bolts and patching tires at the same small garage by the highway. It's honest work, but it doesn't take you far. Some months I finish with just enough to cover the light bill and the school uniforms. Other months, my wife Leah sells fruit in the market to keep us afloat. We live on a hill above the bay, in a wooden house that creaks even when the wind's asleep. Leah calls it humble. I call it loud. Our 3 kids fill it with more sound than any storm. Andre at 11 already trying to be a man, Keisha humming songs she half remembers from church, and Micah, 4 years old, asking questions I never know how to answer. That's my world. Or it was before the night the wind came for us. I thought the day would stay ordinary. I wasn't even close. Sunday, October 26th. The air had that metallic edge that makes your tongue taste salt. The sea smelled like iron, and the dogs down in the valley barked until their voices cracked. Still, the sun stayed out too long, pretending everything was fine. At the garage, I was finishing a tire for a delivery truck. The driver wanted to get home before curfew. My boss, Cooper, kept glancing at the sky. "Melissa not normal, man. Lock up early," he said. I wiped my hands on a rag, shrugged, and told him I'd just finished this one. When I finally rolled the tire into place, the light outside had gone yellow-gray, the kind that turns sweat cold. I closed the bay door, shoved my wrench into my pocket, and checked my cracked phone. The alert blinked red across the screen. Category 5. North Coast landfall expected tonight. That's when my stomach dropped, not from fear but from math. No work, no pay. A week without income meant rice stretched thin, shoes patched again, and Leah trying to smile through it. I started walking home with that thought stuck in my head. The wind hadn't come yet, but the power lines were already humming like a warning. A plastic bag tumbled down the road, twisting through the dust like it was running from something I couldn't see. Leah was waiting by the gate when I turned up the lane. She wore her yellow headscarf pulled tight, 2 buckets filled with water at her feet. She didn't even say hello, just lifted one bucket and said, "They say she's turning faster now, maybe before midnight." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I took the other bucket, set it by the door, and told her what I always tell her when I don't know what else to say. "We'll be fine." I kept one thing to myself. I didn't believe it. Inside, the air was thick with kerosene and salt. Andre sat cross-legged on the floor beside the radio, trying to catch the signal through static. Keisha was folding towels with that serious little frown of hers. Micah clung to Leah's skirt, thumb in his mouth. The announcer's voice came through in bursts. "Melissa, Category 5. Sustained winds 150 miles per hour." Then cut to static again. Leah reached out and turned it down. "We'll pray after supper," she said. I nodded, even though supper was only breadfruit and sardines. She'd already filled the barrels, lined the shelves, and stacked a few tins by the window. She moves like someone who knows what fear costs. I've seen her face hurricanes with less panic than the men at the dock. But that night she was quiet, almost too calm. After we ate, she told me about a dream she had had. "There was a man," she said, "standing by the window. White robe," he said, Hold fast." Then he was gone. I forced a laugh. "You've been listening to too much radio, Leah." She didn't smile. "It wasn't a dream, Dwayne. Not the kind you forget." The lamp flame jumped as she said it. The wind outside shifted direction, like it was turning its face toward us. That's when I felt it, the pressure, like the air itself was leaning in. By 9:30, the first gust hit, just a slap against the zinc, enough to rattle the nails. Keisha gasped. Micah started to cry. I reached for the hammer. The rope we'd tied through the ceiling beam last season still held, but it moaned when the wind pulled at it. I drove a few more nails into the boards, each strike echoing through the house like a slow drum. Leah began reading from the Bible, Psalm 91, her voice trembling but steady. "He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust." The words felt heavy in the air. The lamp flickered, went dim, then steadied again. Outside, the sky flashed white. That was not the hard part. 10 minutes later, the real rain arrived, sideways, slamming the walls. The zinc roof shuddered like something alive. The smell of wet wood and kerosene filled the room. I pressed both hands against the door as it jumped on its hinges, trying to tear free. Leah gathered the kids under the mattress she'd pulled to the floor. Her hair clung to her face, her lips moving in prayer. Andre called out, "Daddy, is it going to break?" "Not tonight," I said. The lie tasted bitter. Lightning flashed again, showing me the bucket line by the door, the small radio on the shelf, the clock above it. The hands glowed faintly. 9:46. I told myself we just had to make it to midnight. Somehow that sounded like safety. I almost told them about the feeling in my chest, the weight that wasn't fear exactly, but something older, like the air was full of memory. But I kept quiet. The wind changed pitch, higher now, almost like screaming. The house answered with a groan. Every few seconds I expected the roof to lift. Leah's voice rose louder, chanting the psalm. Micah cried louder, then suddenly stopped. He looked toward the window and whispered, "Mommy, it's moving." She hushed him, rocked him against her chest. I turned to check the boards. They held, but the edges were wet, the nails straining. The flame leaned again. That's when I heard it. A sound beneath the storm, deep and human, like someone calling my name through water. I froze. "Leah," I said, "you hear that?" She shook her head. "Hear what?" I listened again, nothing but wind. I wanted to open the window and look, but something inside warned me not to. The clock ticked once. Then the second hand stuttered and stopped. I can still see it, the red line caught between numbers, motionless while everything else shook. Leah reached for my hand. Her skin was cold, slick with sweat. "Stay close," she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled so long it felt endless. The rope creaked overhead. The lamp sputtered, flared, then steadied again. I held my breath, waiting for the next blow, the one that would take the roof for good. It never came. Instead, there was a pause so sudden my ears rang. The wind outside dropped just like that, from a scream to silence. The rain slowed to a whisper. For a moment, I thought I'd gone deaf. And that's the part I remember most. The world holding its breath right before everything changed. When I think back to that night now, sitting here 2 days later with the sun blazing outside like it never rained, it still doesn't make sense. The mind tries to explain things. It digs for logic, for sequence, for reason. But some things just don't fit inside reason, no matter how you turn them around. And believe me, I've tried. I've thought about the air pressure, wind shear, all those fancy words the weatherman throws around, but deep down I know it wasn't just weather. It was something else. When everything stopped that night, when the wind, the rain, the thunder just shut off, it didn't feel like nature taking a break. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. I remember thinking maybe I'd gone deaf, that the storm had burst my eardrums. But no. I could still hear the small things, the drip from the roof, the rustle of Leah's skirt, Micah's shaky breathing. The little sounds suddenly felt huge, like every drop of silence had weight. I thought the storm had passed. I wasn't even close. I kept both hands on the door, braced for the next hit. The door didn't move, not a vibration. My heart pounded so hard it made my chest ache. "Leah," I whispered. "You feel that?" She nodded without looking up. "It's too quiet." The candle flame on the table stopped trembling. It stood up straight, a thin pillar of gold that didn't flicker no matter how long I stared at it. I could see the reflection of it in the window, a single flame surrounded by blackness. And in that reflection, something changed. Micah's voice came first, small and trembling. "Mommy, the man's back." Even now, saying those words out loud makes my throat dry. I remember how Leah turned her head slowly toward him, not scared at first, just confused. "What man, baby?" she asked. "The man from your dream," he whispered. That's when I saw it too, the light. Not lightning, not any color I've ever seen before. It started faint, glowing behind the trees, white but with a kind of warmth that looked alive. I can still picture how it spread across the leaves, soft and steady, until it reached the edge of our yard. I know you might not believe me. I wouldn't either if someone else said it. But I swear to you, I saw a man standing inside that light, barefoot, robe flowing around him, not moving, just standing there like he'd been waiting for me to look. He wasn't shining in the way paintings show him. There was no blinding flash or golden crown. He looked human, calm, sad almost, but everything around him seemed to know him. The air, the light, the silence. It was like even the storm had bowed its head. Leah gasped, hand over her mouth. "Dwayne," she whispered, "do you see him?" I couldn't speak. My throat locked up. All I could do was nod. My heart should have been hammering out of my chest, but it wasn't. I felt peace. Pure, complete peace. The kind that feels foreign because life never gives it to you for free. I thought I heard words then, not in my ears, but somewhere deeper, like they were spoken inside me instead of around me. "The wind will pass over." Just 7 words, but they felt older than the air itself. And that's when I noticed the clock. The second hand had frozen right between numbers, 12:47. No ticking, no movement. Time had stopped, and I swear to you, I felt it. Leah started crying, not from fear this time, but from something that looked a lot like relief. She pulled Micah close and whispered, "He's here, Dwayne. He's here." I wanted to go outside, to walk closer to that light, but my legs wouldn't obey me. My body felt both weightless and heavy all at once, like I'd been pinned to that moment by something greater than gravity. I thought about all the things I'd failed at, missed payments, missed chances, missed prayers. I thought maybe this was what mercy felt like, to be seen right in the middle of your smallness and still be spared. Then the light faded. Not slowly, not like a dimmer turning down, but suddenly, like it had simply finished what it came to do. The darkness fell back into place. The rain started again, soft this time, straight down, like someone pouring water gently from above. Leah was still kneeling by the table, the Bible clutched to her chest. The candle burned low, wax spilling over its edge, but it didn't flicker. Not once. When I closed my eyes that night, I could still see that glow behind them, the outline of that man standing so still. I stayed awake until the sky turned pale, and even then, the peace stayed. Now, 2 days later, I keep thinking about that exact moment. I can still feel how warm the air got, even though the house was dripping cold water from the ceiling. I can still smell the salt and the smoke from the lamp. And when I walk outside now, into this too bright sunshine, the world feels different somehow. Quieter. Like it remembers too. Sometimes I sit by the door at night, listening to the breeze slide through the trees, and I almost expect to hear that same silence again. the same impossible pause in the universe. Leah doesn't talk much about it. She just says, "He came and he left peace behind." But I think about what I saw, the calm face, the lifted hand, and I know she's right about something else too. That peace didn't leave. It's still here. And if you ask me now what I believe, I'd tell you the same thing I told her the next morning. Leah, I don't think he stopped the storm. I think he stopped time for us to see that he was already there. That's the part that haunts me the most. Not the thunder, not the wind, the silence. The way it felt like everything in creation paused for one impossible minute, just so we'd know we weren't forgotten. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that light standing in the rain. When I opened the door that morning, I was ready to see everything gone. I had pictured it all night. The roof peeled away, the trees ripped from the ground, the valley below turned to ocean. But when I stepped out, barefoot, the world was still standing. The air was pale and heavy with mist, and the light looked thin, like morning hadn't quite made up its mind about showing up. For a long time, I just stood there, holding the doorframe. The yard was soaked but whole. The banana trees were still upright, dripping quietly. Every house on the hill still had its roof. Not one sheet of zinc twisted, not one wall gone. It didn't make sense. My legs went weak and I just whispered, "No way." I thought the silence in the storm was strange. I was wrong. This was stranger. Leah came up behind me, wrapping a blanket around Micah, her hair loose from the scarf, her eyes wide but calm. "You see," she said softly, "it passed us." I couldn't answer. My throat had that knot you get when you want to cry but can't. The dirt path outside our yard had turned into a stream, muddy but peaceful, carrying little leaves and bottle caps downhill. I looked toward the valley. Mist covered it like breath on glass. You could hear waves breaking far away, but even they sounded careful, like they knew something sacred had happened here. Leah turned on the small battery radio we'd kept by the lamp. The speaker crackled, and the announcer's voice came through, faint, shaky. "Melissa has turned northeast," repeating, "The storm has turned northeast. Jamaica largely spared." He said it twice, slower the second time, like he needed to hear it himself. That's when my knees gave out. I sat right there in the doorway, hands over my face. Leah kept the radio pressed to her chest, and I could hear it still muttering through the static, words about Cuba and damage and winds dying down. But all I could think about was that clock on the wall. 12:47, the exact time. She knelt beside me. "You heard him?" she asked. I nodded. "Then you know." I didn't want to say it out loud, not yet, because saying it would make it too real. Inside, the house smelled like salt and wax. Leah started cleaning up the candle stubs, sweeping away the wet patches on the floor. I was still in a daze when she gasped softly and said, "Dwayne, look." By the door, where the water had pooled overnight, there was a small piece of wood. I thought it was just drift from the floorboard until she picked it up and turned it over in her hand. It was smooth, shaped almost perfectly like a cross, still damp, still smelling of the sea. She held it up, light catching on the wet grain, and whispered, "He left this." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to smile, another part just wanted to fall to my knees again. I looked at her, then at the window where the light had been, and all I could manage was, "It's from outside. The sea must have thrown it up." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Later that afternoon, when the sun finally burned through the mist, we went down the road to check on the neighbors. Mr. Edwards from 2 houses over was already outside, sweeping mud from his steps. "You all right up there?" he called. "Thought your roof gone for sure." "It's still here," I said. He shook his head, grinning but baffled. "Whole night I wait for it to tear off. It never did." Then his smile faded. "You hear the silence too?" I stared at him. "You mean around 1? He nodded. 12 something. Coulda hear your own heart." A chill ran up my arms. Every person we met said the same thing. The silence, the calm, the time. Even the ones farther down the slope, even the dogs had gone quiet. And every one of them used the same word when they tried to describe it. Stillness. I thought faith meant safety. I was wrong. Faith, I learned that day, means presence. It means you're seen even when the wind should have erased you. It means waking up after what should have killed you and realizing you weren't spared by luck. You were spared by love. When the sun finally set again that evening, the house looked new somehow. The rope still hung from the ceiling beam. The clock had started ticking again. The piece of driftwood sat on the table beside the Bible, drying slowly, salt crust gathering at the edges. Leah touched it once before bed and said quietly, "He remembers us." I didn't answer, just sat on the step, watching the last bit of light fade from the hills, and thinking that maybe, for the first time in my life, I believed her. 2 days passed before I could bring myself to touch a tool again. The air had that strange, clean smell storms leave behind, salt and metal and new grass. The sun was out, bright as if it had something to prove, but the light felt too sharp after all that darkness. I was up on the roof that morning, hammering a loose shingle back in place, when it finally hit me how close we'd come to not seeing another day. Below me, Leah was hanging clothes on the line. The white sheets snapped in the breeze, and for the first time, that sound didn't make me flinch. The children were playing by the mango tree, their bare feet splashing in puddles that had already started to dry. From a distance, you'd never guess what that house had survived. Inside, on the table by the window, the small driftwood cross rested beside the open Bible. The salt on it had dried into a thin crystal skin that caught the light. I didn't move it. Somehow it felt wrong too. It had become part of the house now, same as the rope hanging from the beam or the clock that had started ticking again. I thought normal life would come rushing back. I wasn't even close. Because ever since that night, everything ordinary felt different. Every sound, every breeze carried something I couldn't name. Sometimes, while I worked, I'd feel a hum under the noise of the hammer, like the memory of that silence hadn't completely left us. That afternoon, Leah was humming a hymn under her breath while she cleaned. The old battery radio sat by the window, half rusted, still coated in dust from the storm. I hadn't heard it make a sound since the morning after. Then, out of nowhere, it crackled alive. I froze mid-swing, the hammer still in my hand. The static hissed, then steadied. For a second, I thought it was just picking up weather reports again, but through the static came a whisper, soft and breath-like, 3 words only. "Still with you." Then silence. The hammer slipped from my hand and hit the roof. I climbed down fast and stepped inside. Leah looked up, startled. "What happened?" "The radio," I said. "It talked." She smiled that tired smile, the one she wears when she knows I'm halfway between doubt and belief. "Maybe someone was praying on the other end," she said. "Maybe," I told her. But I knew that voice hadn't come from any station. It had come from the same place the light did. I didn't say that out loud. Some things you hold quietly, like a pulse under your ribs. That evening, when the sun began to slide into the sea, I sat outside again. The yard was full of laughter. Andre chasing the ball, Keisha braiding Micah's hair. I watched them, thinking how easily joy returns to children, how quickly they forgive the world for scaring them. The hills were green again. The sea lay still. I'm not the kind of man who talks much about miracles. People at the garage already tease me for being quiet. They say, "Dwayne, you dream too much," when I stop mid-sentence to watch the sky. The truth is, I'm not dreaming. I'm remembering. Sometimes when I hear thunder miles away, my first thought isn't fear anymore. It's recognition. Like an old friend knocking to see if I still remember what peace sounds like. That night, after we put the kids to bed, Leah and I sat by the window where we'd seen him. The same soft wind moved through the banana trees. She asked, "You think he'll come again?" I looked at the cross, at the small cracks the salt had left on the wood, and I said, "He never left." She nodded, and we sat there in quiet. No candles this time, no storm outside, just the sound of the clock ticking steady. You know, I used to think faith was something people clung to when they had nothing else. But now I see it's the thing that holds you when everything else breaks. The world still throws wind and loss and hunger our way, but inside me, there's a stillness that wasn't there before. I fix cars, patch roofs, count every coin the same as always. But the way I listen has changed. The wind used to be noise. Now it's reminder. And every night before I close my eyes, I whisper the same words Leah said when the storm should have ended us. Jesus is still with us. Because He is. When I think back on it now, sitting under the same roof that should have been gone, I realize the miracle wasn't only that the storm passed, it was that something inside me changed when it did. I used to believe faith meant nothing bad would happen if you prayed hard enough. But that night taught me something deeper. Faith isn't what keeps the wind away. It's what lets you stand when it comes. It's the quiet strength that holds your heart steady while the world shakes around you. So tonight, as the air outside hums with crickets and the sea rests like glass again, I want to take a moment for all those who still wait for peace after their storms. Let us pray for those who still seek light in their darkest moments, and for those who feel forgotten in the silence that follows. Lord, for every heart still trembling in the aftermath of loss, send the same calm you gave us that night. For every home broken by wind or grief, let your peace be the first thing that enters through the door. Teach us to see miracles not just in thunder or fire, but in the stillness after, the kind that settles deep into the soul. Remind us that your hand is never far, even when all we can hear is rain. Let gratitude rise stronger than fear, and hope outlast every storm. Bless every family listening tonight, every person holding on to faith by a single thread. Let them know you never left, and you never will. Amen. If you felt something while hearing this story, take a second and share it with someone who might be standing in their own storm right now, and like this video. Leave a comment below and write the words, "Jesus is still with us." I'll read every single one and count them, so I'll know how many of us still believe, still hold faith, and still trust that He's here among us. Subscribe to our channel for more.